Hi, everyone.
Hey,
My
Ray,
name,
how you doing?
I'm Amie Kaufman, and this is
Hi,
Kristoff.
Jay. How you doing? This is the first time we've ever done anything like this. Usually we have someone holding our hands, so it could be a
Right.
train wreck, but please forgive us if it is, because we're all learning.
I know, and I don't know, slightly impressed by the good people at Dymocks giving us their channel. That again seems fraught with risk, but we'll try very hard to make sure they don't regret it.
Yeah, I'm impressed at the authors who did this by themselves. I can't imagine anything more terrifying. At least we've got each other. So if we get something to say or uncomfortable silence, someone else can jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so what we thought we would do is tell you all a little bit about sort of how we met and how we got writing together. And then, because the thing that we're most frequently asked about is sort of how do you actually write together? And the joke answer is, well, I take the consonants and he takes the vowels. But really, like, how do you make a book together? So we thought we'd talk a little about that, and then we're going to read you a tiny bit before we start answering your questions.
So if you have questions, you can type them into the chat and we'll
You
get them
can.
as we go. I think we also have to cover off this competition.
We
There was
do. Yes.
an Aurora Burning prize pack given out this week by the Dymocks Reading Challenge. So the 5 winners are, and you're going to get contacted over Twitter by Dymocks, but we're just going to let you know you won anyway. So it is Celestial Reads, 𝘕𝗦𝘬 Little Miss Ninja Runs of Stars and Stories, and the Magical Book Court. So congratulations, there is a Aurora Burning copy coming to you as well as an Academy patch, and you also get Memento, which is the novella that Amie and I wrote to accompany the 𝘕𝘦𝘸 trilogy, and you actually can't get that anywhere in the world anymore. So I don't know, you could sell it and put your kids through university or something.
I'm no doubt. But for everybody else, if you would like to get an Aurora Academy patch, that was easy to say. The Aurora Academy, for any who the uninitiated, is the military school that the characters in our novel go to. And if you buy a copy of Aurora Burning from Dymocks, it will come, while stocks last, with a free patch that you can stick on your bag or your jacket or wherever the cool kids stick their patches these days.
Yeah,
I've got one, so I should find out where they stick them.
Ever one of the cool kids, and neither were you. So
It's never happened, and I don't want to get depressed too early on, but it may be too late.
all right, so
How did we meet?
Start off by talking how we met, which is it's a kind of a weird story, and it's a story that comes in 2 parts. So I usually tell the first part, and Amie tells the second. But basically, we are Australian, and most of the big publishing companies are United States based. And so when you're an Australian living here but earning money in the United States, you need to get what's called an ITIN, which is International Tax Identification Number, which isn't a super creative title, but it's basically a social security number for non-US residents. And the means by which you acquire this number is it's like running a gauntlet of red tape while bureaucratic ninjas try to kill you. It's probably the most tedious and difficult government task I've ever had to do. You're dealing with the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service in the United States, and they are no help whatsoever. When you ring their helpline, the first thing that you'll hear them say is, "Good morning, Internal Revenue Service. How may I attempt to help you today?"
Yeah, so they already know.
Yeah, because they basically know they can't. The people that you are dealing with on the helpline live in a different state and a different time zone to the people who are processing these ITIN forms. So if you have a problem on the form, the people that you speak to literally probably can't help you. So I tried 3 times to get this number, and it costs $200 a pop every time you try. And when you fail, they don't tell you what you did. They just tell you no, and they take your $200 and you have to try again. And after attempt number 3, I finally braved the gauntlet and made it past the bureaucratic ninjas and got my number. And my first book was coming out, I think 6 months before Amie's first book.
Yeah.
And so she was just starting on this ITIN journey as I was coming to the end of it. And to give you some context, Amie has a law degree. She's a very smart lady, used to dealing with government departments, and she couldn't figure out this maze.
There was actually one question that said, if you are a US resident, tick box A. If you are not a US resident, tick box B. And so I ticked box B, and then it said, if you have ticked box B, go to question 9. And I went to question 9, and no word of a lie, it said, if you have come from question 3, go back. That was the entirety of the instruction. So I'm complaining really loudly about this in my office to my best work buddy.
Yeah. So this work colleague of Amy's was also one of my best mates. And so he said, well, hey, I know this guy who has literally just succeeded at this task that you're trying to succeed at. Maybe if I give you his contact details, he can tell you what magic strings he pulled to get it done. So Amie sent me an email out of the blue, offered to buy me breakfast, and if I could explain the ITIN magic. And we just got together that Sunday morning, and we just started hanging out together, really, because we were both baby authors living in Melbourne. We didn't really know anyone else in the writing community at the time. And so we were kind of a breakfast club of two for a little while there.
Yeah. Yeah. And we used to, I mean, once we'd done the paperwork, we just sort of got to catching up because we didn't know anybody else who was in our situation. So, you know, it would be, my editor keeps using this word and I should have asked the first time what it meant and I didn't. Any chance you know what this word means? And you know, trying to nut out what it was to be published overseas. And I can see someone saying "Alleluia" to that mutual friend. We actually dedicated our first book together to that mutual friend.
Yeah, it's because dedicated 𝘕𝘦𝘸 to him.
Yeah, without Nick, never would have happened.
And we thank the IRS in the back of the book in the acknowledgements. We didn't dedicate the book to them, obviously, but we said thank you to them.
They did.
Authors in the history of that's done that.
So look, we may be the only people who've ever unironically thanked the IRS,
yeah.
But so we get together, you know, for I'm sorry, I'm loving your comments. So we get together, you know, month to month for breakfast, and one night before we go to have breakfast, I have this dream, and you know when you like real anxiety dreams, you know, suddenly you're back at school and there's a test that you didn't know was going to happen, and you know the test is in German, and you're not wearing any pants. Although I always like to specify everyone in this pants or dream, everyone in this dream or pants at all times. Very important. Yeah. But I had this dream that Jay and I were co-writing a novel. I mean, it was probably because I was already writing a co-writing series with Megan Spooner, and I was seeing Jay the next day. But the anxiety dream part of it was that I couldn't remember what my own book was about. And so I spent the whole dream sort of fishing, being like, so Jay, if you were to pitch, how would you pitch the book? And how would you describe what happened, you know, next in this chapter? And I never worked out what the book was about. But when I went and saw Jay the next morning, I told him this story and that we had been writing this. The only thing I remembered about it was that the book had been a book entirely of emails. There were no traditional chapters in it. And I mean, he laughed at me for having an anxiety dream about a book, which was fair. But there was kind of a moment after we both stopped laughing where we kind of went, ha, 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 though, but wait. And we started to just really, purely for fun, we started to brainstorm, what would that book be if we were going to write it? And that was the book that turned into 𝘕𝘦𝘸, which was our first novel together. And now we're in our second series together. So
yeah, this is book number 5. I remember I was going through clearing out my Google inbox ages ago, or not so long ago, because the email box was getting full. And I found the emails where you and I were first talking about what the book would be about.
Oh, wow.
And what we were talking about and what it actually ended up it's completely different. Like, all we knew was there's going to be a boy and a girl in a classroom together, and they were emailing each other about a shared project that they were doing. And then there was literally, and then something happens, ... revolution, ? And that was us starting to talk about 𝘕𝘦𝘸. So yeah, we had absolutely no idea what we were doing.
We have come a long way since then. I mean, and that's particularly funny because actually one of the things that we want to talk about tonight is the prep that we did for writing this current series, which was considerably more detailed than it was for our first series.
I mean, we had no idea that 𝘕𝘦𝘸 was going to get published. Like, we thought the idea was just too weird and it would be too expensive, and we hadn't really seen a book like it. And traditionally, people tend to get scared off by things they haven't seen and can't recognize before. So we figured that the idea was just too weird for it to ever get made. So when we were writing it, we just kind of wrote it for ourselves, really.
Yeah.
And then we found a publisher that was insane enough to publish it. So
yeah,
thank you.
You're the best.
Yes.
So yeah, now we are on the Aurora cycle, and the book we're talking about tonight is book 2. But I guess we wanted to talk a little bit about the inspirations behind it, and the sort of things that influenced it a little bit, and to talk about how we collaborated on it, how we started writing. And when you're looking for something to write together, um, you're looking for something that you're both really passionate about. So you're sort of almost starting looking for the overlap in your Venn diagram. You're looking for, this is stuff that I'm really excited about. This is stuff that Jay is really excited about. Where's the overlap? And I mean, for us, the overlap is around being giant space nerds. It's around Star Trek. It's around, epic adventures of that sort. It's around sort of squads and gangs and heists. And that's sort of how we began to build our story.
Yeah. It actually, we were thinking about it the other day. The inspiration really started when we were on tour for 𝘕𝘦𝘸 back in 2015, like probably 4.5 years ago. Well, no, it'd be like 5 years ago. It's 5 years ago almost this month. Yeah.
That is a picture of us in Seattle on tour for 𝘕𝘦𝘸 in front of the famous chewing gum wall, which is why we look incredibly dubious about what is behind us.
So that's a thing that people in Seattle do. There's a wall near the market where people walk along and stick their chewing gum to it. And so there are millions of chunks of secondhand chewing gum stuck on this wall in Seattle. I don't know why they do it. They apparently cleaned it off like 2 years ago, and literally the next day people were sticking chewing gum back on it. It's weird. I don't know. Seattle people.
People in Seattle will not be governed.
Yeah, I don't know. But anyway, we were on tour in Seattle, and we had a couple of hours off, and so we went to a place called the Chihuly Glass Museum. Chihuly is a very famous artist who works almost exclusively in glass. He does these amazing 3D sculptures, and I actually found these photos on my phone the other day when I was looking through them. But we were walking through this room, and yeah, they were, as you can see, there's these weird glass sculptures just kind of covering the floor, almost carpeting the entire room.
And I mean, those are human size. They're amazing.
Yeah, they're massive. And so we were just walking through and looked at each other, and we didn't know what it was going to be, whether it was going to be in the series we were working on or the next series we would work on. But we kind of decided that one day we were going to write a planet that looked like that. And so the 𝘕𝘠, which is the kind of the big bad, the evil alien that the guys are fighting in this series, is kind of directly inspired by those images. There's also a picture there on the right by an artist named James Jean, or James Jean, I'm not sure how it's pronounced. And we saw that same illustration in the window of a store on the way to that museum. So the girl with the flowers kind of bursting out of her was also an inspiration for the 𝘕𝘠. So if you've read the first book and know what happens at the end of it, then you will know exactly what we're talking about. But yeah.
Yeah, and if you haven't, then, well, you're in for an experience.
Yeah, welcome.
Welcome to our world. But I mean, I think one of the things that any author will tell you they are asked a lot is, where do your ideas come from? And the answer is they're everywhere, and they're usually in places that you don't expect. And this was a perfect example. We had a half day off. We could have just put our feet up in our hotel rooms and watched bad American cable, but we decided to go exploring. And I mean, we had no idea what the Glass Museum was going to be like, except that, a lot of people had told us it was cool, so why not? And that little moment when something tingles and you think, well, I'm going to use that for something, something will be born of this, was really, really, really special.
Yeah. So I guess the message is go to weird places. Go and do things that you might not necessarily do, because inspiration you can literally find anywhere. Yeah,
absolutely. So we sort of started building this world that was sort of a little bit inspired by, the utopian kind of world of Star Trek, leagues of different planets and different species all working together. And, we had some ideas of some things that you might encounter along the way. I don't want to spoil anyone who hasn't started the series. And the next thing we needed to do was build our squad of characters. So we had to think really hard about how to do that, because in our first series, we had each taken sort of very primary responsibility for particular characters, and we would write them alone in scenes, just the nature of the book. Whereas in this series, by chapter 3, they're all in a room together, which means we both needed to be able to write all of the characters from the word dot.
Yeah. for those of you who haven't read 𝘕𝘦𝘸, the two main characters spend the entire book kind of separated. They're in isolation trying to get back to each other. So we had the opportunity to kind of find out who they were in isolation before they really had to interact with anyone else. And we were discovering them as we went. We were learning who they were as we wrote them. But we knew that the characters in the new series would be bouncing off each other almost immediately. Like, yeah, chapter 3, there's 5 of them in the same room all talking at each other. So we needed to have a much more fully formed idea of who they were, what they wanted, how they would act, and how they would treat each other before we started writing. So the pre-prod on Aurora was a lot more intense. Like I said, 𝘕𝘦𝘸, we didn't think anyone was ever going to read it. We thought it was just too weird, so we were just kind of making it up as we went. But
yeah, this gorgeous art you're seeing, by the way, is art of the characters who are in the series, and it's by an artist called Keira Knight, and we love it to bits. She's so talented.
She is amazing. So we basically did big spreadsheets, like character bios that outlined, you know, name and height and weight and looks and all that stuff, but also, you know, who these people's parents were, how they grew up, what were the circumstances around their childhood, what are the things they love, what are the things they hate, what are the things you can do to press their button every time. So we kind of broke them down over these kind of big 4 or 5 page bios and then sent them to each other just to give the other author, because there were 7 main characters in the first book, so we kind of broke them in half and took stewardship over them, wrote up those backgrounds and then sent them to each other, because as Amie said, very quickly we were writing each other's characters, so to speak, so we needed to know them a lot better, a lot quicker.
Yeah. So, and it's one of the questions we're most frequently asked about this series is who writes which character, and we never say. And I mean, one of the reasons we never say is, I mean, partly because it's a little bit fun watching people try to guess, but mostly it's because the truth is we both write all of the characters. It might be that one of us had initial sort of stewardship over creating them, or that one of us wrote that particular chapter, but a line or a joke or a moment that you like from any of those characters could be in a chapter that either one of us wrote, or we might have edited each other's chapter to include it, because we edit each other a lot. We have a lot of input on each other's chapters. It really is very collaborative. So, you know, the truth is they just are our characters.
Yeah, the lines are a lot blurrier this time through. So yeah. It is far more of a collaborative process, I guess, than 𝘕𝘦𝘸 was. So that's kind of different and cool this time.
Yeah. So funnily enough, the character that we're going to read to you from tonight is actually the only one that doesn't have a portrait here. And that is Magellan. And that is because Magellan is not a person. Magellan is, for want of a better description, an iPad with big ideas. Magellan, they all have what is called a uniglass, and their uniglass is, you know, a jumped up iPad. It can research anything. It projects stuff above itself, you know, in holograms, and can tell you almost anything. And throughout the book are scattered these sort of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy style entries that our main character Aurora is pulling up from Magellan to try and figure out what on earth is going on all around her. And we thought we would read you a few of them and tell you how they came to be.
Yeah, each uniglass has it's like a Siri. It has like a personality and a voice that will talk to you, but it's implied that the uniglass that Aurora gets given is slightly faulty. Like it got given a personality upgrade by Scarlett, who was Tyler's sister, the uniglass having belonged to Tyler. His sister just kind of downloaded this thing onto it, and it screwed up the persona matrix, but it's a secondhand one, so Tyler gives it to Ori at the start of book 1. And so it doesn't quite act the way other uniglasses do. It's a little more anthropomorphic, I guess, and everyone else is a little bit weirded out that she treats it almost like a person and gives it a name, because it's like naming your iPhone. It's kind of a weird thing to do. But
yeah,
Magellan is not like the other uniglasses, I guess.
No. So, I mean, for us, Magellan was inspired a little bit by Talkie Toaster from Red Dwarf. And it's fun talking to Australian audiences because at least some of you are going to know what Red Dwarf is, whereas the Americans are baffled, and usually only more baffled after we try to explain what Red Dwarf
I have no idea.
is. And, you know, also a little inspired by Eddie the Shipboard Computer from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy radio plays. So very chirpy, sometimes very helpful.
Yeah. So
system.
Like the job that Magellan is doing in the story is because Aurora, who's the main character, there's no real spoilers here, it's on the back of the book, but she is 200 years out of time. She got frozen in cryogenic sleep. She gets woken up 2 centuries after she was supposed to. So she's in a galaxy and a setting that she has absolutely no real understanding of. And so in an effort to help her out, Tyler gives her a uniglass, and she is constantly looking stuff up on it when she encounters a new alien species or when someone uses a word that she's never heard before or whatever. So Magellan was a way for us to explain to Aurora and you, the reader, a little bit more about the setting. But we were trying to do it in a funny way, which is why we kind of borrowed the tone of Talkie Toaster and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy narrator and old classic British science fiction.
Well, because the worst thing, one of the worst crimes an author can commit is to pop in what we call an "as you know, Bob." And an "as you know, Bob" moment is when 2 scientists stand in the middle of a nuclear reactor and one of them says to the other, "As you know, Bob, if that switch over there were to malfunction, then the whole of Peopleville would be destroyed." Now, Bob does already know that. You just said, "as you know," so why on earth are you telling him? So the hunt for ways to teach you things that don't involve people telling each other things they already know is always a fierce one.
Yeah. So, a trick that we used was throwing somebody into the mix who had absolutely no understanding about the setting whatsoever. So as you, the reader, learn as Ori learns. Like she is basically an audience surrogate in that sense. And through her, you, the reader, find out all about this galaxy. So,
you know what probably wouldn't kill us is to describe in a line or two what the book is about.
Sure.
We didn't do that at the start, but although I suspect probably most people who are watching are familiar with what we do, in case any aren't, it is essentially the series is about a squad from an interstellar military academy. They are loser squad. They are the ones that nobody wants. And they are commanded by the Academy's golden boy, who missed out on the chance to draft the dream squad that he wanted because he was off rescuing Aurora, the girl that we've just been talking about who doesn't know what's going on. So our band of misfits and losers and reprobates all end up needing to save the galaxy. And the tagline for the series is, "They're not the heroes we wanted, they're just the only ones we could find." So
yeah. And book 2, it's hard to talk about book 2 without getting the spoilers for book 1. So book 2 is basically the book where everything goes wrong, where deep dark secret comes out, the things that they were trying to shield from their friends, and I guess the scope of the conflict becomes apparent to everybody involved in it. So you thought it was bad, and now it's just gotten 10 times worse. So
it'll be fine.
Yeah, it'll be fine.
Yeah. All right, so I am going to read a couple of Magellan entries from book 1, which is Aurora Rising, and Jay is going to be reading a couple from book 2, Aurora Burning. So the first one that I am going to read is right before a scene when our characters are going to have to crash an amazing masquerade ball. And Aurora asks Magellan, tell me about parties in the future, I don't know. And Magellan gives her an entry on famous parties in history. And I want you in particular to listen for number 2, because number 2 is a real party. And you're not going to believe this as you're hearing it. Number 2 happened. 1 and 3 are fictional. So Magellan's entry is how to have a good time, subheading parties, subheading famous parties in history. The third greatest party of all time occurred throughout the Rotan system on the occasion of the Grand 𝘕𝘕 wedding. Festivities involved 437,000 guests from 27 planets and one of only 3 known performances of the forbidden dance of Bass. At the conclusion, the Grand 𝘕𝘕 was wedded to 73 spouses and presumably quite tired. History's second greatest party was thrown on Terra in 1694 by Naval Admiral Edward Russell. This champion among humans mixed, get ready, 250 gallons of brandy, 125 gallons of wine, 635 kilograms of sugar, 20 gallons of lime juice, and 3 kilograms of nutmeg into an enormous cocktail fountain, a literal fountain. Bartenders manning canoes worked shifts lasting just 15 minutes thanks to the fumes, and it took all 5,000 guests 8 days to drink it. Admiral Russell, I am but a humble uni-glass, but I salute you. But without question, the greatest party in history was thrown by the Keat people of Leibowitz 7. An unfortunate misreading of an ancient prophecy led the Keat to believe that the apocalypse was nigh, and they partied like it was the end of the world. Piecemeal records suggest that a regrettable decision involving a dance-off and the world's largest antimatter reactor resulted in the early fulfillment of prophecy. So this is possibly also a good place to mention that we throw a lot of Easter eggs into these books, and some of them are shout outs to Star Trek or to Red Dwarf or to Fifth Element or other things that influenced it. And sometimes it's just our buds, and everybody who's not Naval Admiral Edward Russell in that entire entry is one of my friends. I thought it would entertain them. I particularly thought that one of them would enjoy becoming the forbidden dance of Bass. So in she went.
I want to know who was still drinking that brandy after it had been in a fountain for 8 days.
With bartenders canoeing around.
You would have to be really, really thirsty or really drunk, I guess.
Very drunk, I would think, by then. Yeah. So it may have been, you know. Anyway, Jay's going to read the next entry.
All right. So this one is from book 2. It's under the subject Galactic Species with the subhead Unaligned and Gramps. So Gramps are something that we talked about in book 1 but never actually showed or explained, but we meet a bunch of them in book 2. So this is the Uniglass entry about them. Gramps are furry bipedal species from the Arcturus system and one of the youngest races in the galaxy. They typically stand less than a meter tall and from a Terran perspective resemble small humanoid felines. Cute and cuddly as they may look, Gramps are one of the more infamously hostile species in the galaxy. Carnivorous by nature, they consider other sentient life a potential food source, and their first contact with another spacefaring species, the Ishtari of Melkai 3, resulted in a brief firefight followed by a 4-course meal, a fact that the Ishtari representatives in the Galactic Caucus are quick to remind everybody of when the Gramps press for membership. Any urge to pet one should be immediately put out of your mind unless you're tired of owning fingers. So yeah, we meet a bunch of them at the start of book 2. They're kind of like, I guess they're kind of our ode to Jawas and Ewoks, kind of smushed together, but yeah, we made them very hostile. So yeah.
Yeah. Fun fact, when I was very, very small, my parents took my brother to see Star Wars at the drive-in, and small me was popped into the boot of the station wagon along with a blanket and told to go to sleep. And I woke up and started watching, and they were watching one Star Wars movie. I was watching Ewoks, different Star Wars movie, out the back, and came home the next day, started talking to them about furry creatures with glowing eyes. And my mother was like, is the child possessed? What's happening? Where has this come from? Nope, turns out I had been watching a different Star Wars movie through the back window of the car when I was meant to be asleep.
How old were you?
3, 4?
Yeah, Ewoks are pretty scary to a 4-year-old.
I know. I mean, I think they're pretty scary now if you think about it.
Well, they do try to eat people. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think that Ewoks are. Yeah, I have questions. Anyway, my second and final entry is about 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 society. So 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 are one of the alien races that humans encounter, and often this is an entry we wrote to pop in. Yeah, there's one of them right there on the cover of that. So this is an entry that we wrote to let the reader know about their social customs so that when one of them was broken in the next chapter, the reader would understand what was happening. So the heading is 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 society, subheading social customs, subheading how not to get punched. The first thing to know about learning 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 customs is that you'll fail. They're impossibly subtle and most species consider them formal to a fault. 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 bow instead of nodding. They close their eyes instead of bowing. Major traps to avoid are: 1. Not deferring to the eldest person in the room. 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 believe that wisdom comes with age. This is very convenient since their life expectancy is a few hundred years, and any 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘳 you're talking to is probably older than you. 2, making uninvited physical contact, especially of an intimate nature. For a 𝘕𝘮𝘐, this includes touch applied anywhere on the face, neck, ears, or hands. Hugs are also right out. What happens in the next chapter is worse than that. 3, insulting their mothers. Just don't. So that's an example of one that we wrote to, lay out a little bit of information so that as the reader makes their way through the next chapter and things begin to go badly wrong, they understand just why the 𝘕𝘮𝘐 in that chapter is responding the way that he is.
Yeah, and if you do a reread and watch the places where Cal closes his eyes, where it's actually mentioned in the text, he only does it as a kind of sign of formal respect. So the thinking there is if you close your eyes, you can't see the person opposite you. So it's a sign of respect and trust. So it's kind of like, bowing with your head to the floor. So we were just trying to think of little ways that would make humanoid species still distinct from each other, because there's a weirdness in the universe, in the sense, or the galaxy, in the sense that every alien race that has been thus far discovered are all bipedal, they are all carbon-based, and they are all oxygen breathers, which is what we are. So there's actually been a
unlikely, right?
Yeah, the probability of that actually happening in an evolutionary sense of its own accord is almost impossible. And so a religion has sprung up around that idea. There are 430 species in the galaxies, and we all kind of look like each other. So that can't be chance. There has to be some design behind all this. So as a result of that, a religion called the United Faith has kind of sprung up across the galaxy. So there's some more weirdness behind that you find out in book 2.
Yeah. So after Jay reads this next one, we're going to be doing questions. So if you have them, type them in.
All right, so this is also from book 2, and this is about an organization called the Dominion. So at the start of book 2, the guys are forced into another kind of space heist, and they have to make their way into this place called the Dominion Vault. The Dominion is kind of like galactic PayPal, I guess. We were trying to think of a way that the galaxy could have a currency that would actually work. So this is our attempt to explain it. So subject, galactic commerce, organizations, the Dominion. Whoever said money is the root of all evil probably never had any, but it does make life in the galaxy a little complicated. The Milky Way has no official currency, and for reasons that may not be clear to your tiny human brain, chances of it getting one are very small. Enter the Dominion. The Dominion is a band of trade speculators and the largest currency exchange in the galaxy. Realizing there was a huge profit to be made in the absence of a standard unit of trade, the Dominion created its own, offering to buy the currency of any known species, for a small fee of course, and convert it into exchangeable Dominion credits, which are now accepted in most trade hubs. Of course, this scheme quickly made the Dominion wealthier than Professor 𝘕𝘮𝘮𝘮 IV, the inventor of self-washing diapers, which in turn gave it an enormous clout over politicians in the Galactic Caucus, which explains why we're not going to be seeing any official galactic currency anytime soon. Democracy, huh?
Man, we spent so long sitting around trying to work out what
invention would make you fabulously wealthy. Yeah,
like what did this guy invent that made him wealthier than anyone who's ever lived? We were like, it's definitely, well, it says diapers for the Americans, but yeah, self-washing nappies definitely, because not at all influenced by the fact that I've got a nearly 1-year-old.
I think you were pregnant at the time when we were writing that. Yeah, so
yeah,
life imitating art a little bit.
Yeah. All right. So first question: are any of the characters you write based on or named after people you know or have encountered? I mean, we throw a lot of names of people we know in, but not for actual characters. We throw them in for, like I named the Forbidden Dance of Bass after my friend, and so on. But
there's Kat. There's Kat.
Yeah.
She was kind of Kat in the first book. She was originally named Sarah, but we figured out on like draft 2 or 3 there were 2 female characters with S names.
And Sarah and Scar was a little...
Yeah, Sarah and Scar, particularly when they were talking to each other, it was just a little bit hard to track. And so we had to give her a name that was totally different. In the end, we called her Kat, and there's another character called Cal. So we didn't really think that one through. But Kat is sort of named after a buddy of ours. She's another Melbourne author. But yeah, generally speaking, we try not to put too much of people we know directly into the book, because generally speaking, a lot of bad things happen to the people in our book.
Right.
And we don't want anyone to take offense from it. So we might steal, personality traits or turns of phrase or habits or worldviews from people that we know, because every creative is kind of influenced by the people that they know in the world around them. But as far as putting someone directly into the book goes, no, we haven't done that yet.
All right. How often do you disagree about what should happen in the book, and what do you do if you disagree? It's so interesting. People want to know this
all the time.
And I think it's funny, because I think when people look at us talking, I think the issue is maybe they can't imagine us fighting, and so they want to know what is it like?
What does it look like? Yeah.
The answer is we've never had a fight ever. We've had a couple of times when we had different ideas about what we thought should happen next, but it was never. I mean, to my mind, an actual disagreement is, one of you has to be, frustrated or angry or feel not listened to or hurt, whereas we very much experience having different ideas about what we should do next as sort of standing side by side, looking at the problem together.
Yeah. There was that road trip where I was in a car with Amy and two of our other US buddies, and we were driving down to, I think it was Mornington Peninsula, right?
No, we were taking them along the Great Ocean Road.
Great Ocean Road, yeah, right.
Really long drive.
Yeah, and they kept playing "Shake It Off" by Taylor Swift at me just to annoy me. I think that's probably
the closest
we've ever actually come to blows.
But
look at me, I'm not a huge Taylor Swift fan, so
no, it doesn't come naturally to him. But Jay has a rule, which is the driver picks the tunes.
Right. That's not my rule. That's just a universal rule. That's everyone's rule. I didn't make that one up.
Right. So when we go on tour in the US, we almost always drive, because I don't know if any of you have ever tried to take a 6'7" guy on a domestic flight, every day for 2 weeks, but
yeah, it doesn't work.
We advise against it. So usually we ask our publisher if we can we're very low maintenance, can we just get a car instead? And Jay does almost all of the driving, which means I listen to heavy metal for 2 weeks. So
that's not my rule. That's the rule of the road.
But when I got the chance to play that man Taylor Swift, I did it.
Yeah,
I had no choice. All right. Do we have now? What
advice
do you have for young writers? I think that one of mine would be that if you're looking at what you're doing and you're getting discouraged, or you don't think that it's very good, which I think is what often gets down a lot of young writers. They look at it and it's not as good as they want it to be. That's actually a positive, because what it means is that you can see what's wrong with it, and that means that you actually do have skills. And that's an experience that professional writers have all the time, that we're looking at something and we know it's not as good as we want it to be. And even if you don't yet quite know how to fix it, the fact that you can tell it's not right, that's great. Don't take that as a bad sign at all, even though it might feel like one.
Yeah, particularly when first drafts are concerned. If you feel your first draft sucks, it probably does, because all first drafts suck. But the fact that you are aware that it does means that you're at least aware that something is wrong and needs to be fixed. Whereas thinking that you're awesome and that your first draft is perfect the first time you wrote it means you probably don't have a sense of your own writing. So the fact that you think it's bad is a good sign. It means you're able to self-critique.
Yeah.
And if you get into this job, critique is going to be something that you will be dealing with constantly throughout it. It is part of your job, but the most important critic is yourself. You can't let that critic stop you doing the work, as in, I am so bad at this, I shouldn't write anymore. But self-criticism is the way to improve your writing. So that's a good thing to be happening.
Yeah. All right. Do you think you will write a third trilogy together? You're so good at it. Thank you, Tracy. You're my favorite.
Tracy.
I'd say your odds are pretty good, Tracy. I'd say
we've got to finish this third book first.
Yeah,
because we're
writing right now.
Yeah, we are writing it right now, and we have a pretty good idea of what we're doing with it. I think
I hope so. We're at that point where we think now that we know what's going to happen, but now we have to execute it, and that might be where it all comes to bits. But hopefully not. Hopefully we got it.
Yeah, I was reading through the plan that we have, because we put everything in a Google document. We have like a big planning document, and then break. So there are 3 main storylines in the 3rd book, and we're currently writing one of them, and we've plotted that out through to completion. That plot will then get broken down into individual chapters, so POVs, and then we will go away and write those chapters depending on whose POV it is. I was reading through it the other day. I think that plotline's a bit of a banger. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, if it works, I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
I can see a question from Kim that I would like to answer because I think it's an important one. I can see Kim says, one of the things I love about the Aurora cycle is the diversity of the squad. Looking at disability, race, gender, sexuality, was this something you wanted to do from the start, or was it something that happened organically? And I think this one's a good one to talk about because it was something that we wanted to do from the start, and it was something that we did on purpose. Because science fiction, if you go back, several decades, does not have the world's greatest track record with this. The stuff that we call the classics now, is full of a lot of very straight, able-bodied white dudes. And that's not what our world looks like. It's not what my world looks like. It's not what Jay's world looks like. It's not what our friendship groups and our families look like. And I think, you will find all over the YA world this, right now. And, if you're watching and you're not a YA reader, then, come join us. But you will see in so many books in the YA world that they do look a lot like the real world, and that's on purpose. And it's done really thoughtfully and carefully and with a lot of consultation and a lot of research. But it's really important to do in your writing.
We also took a bit of a cue from original Star Trek, like Gene Roddenberry era Star Trek. Because if you look at the composition of the bridge crew in that television show and consider when it was being made, it's actually pretty amazing. You've got Nisha Williams, who's an African-American woman in a primary role on a television series. You've got I can't remember the actor's name. The guy who played Chekhov, he's a Russian, and that was right in the middle of the Cold War. And you have a Russian flying the ship that's being crewed by these other people who are ostensibly American. You have a person of mixed heritage. Spock is half Vulcan and half human. So like within that command group, you already have a whole bunch of diverse personalities, and they're not there out of a sense of tokenism. Like they are, yeah, who they are was a statement to the world in which that television show was made. The idea that humanity can overcome our differences, we can learn to accept each other for who we are and kind of stride forward into the stars. So that sense of, I guess, it's a little bit, it's almost too utopian, I guess. It's maybe a little bit too simplified, a little bit too cheesy, but that was the feeling that we were aiming for in our universe as well.
Yeah.
So that was something that informed the world building in particular, kind of right from the get-go.
Yeah. All right. Erica says, how do you know when your novel has crossed the line between young adult fiction and adult fiction? I mean,
we were talking about this today.
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of content, we both feel like there's actually nothing that you can't do in YA. But it is more about, and I mean, this is just one theory, there are whole academic articles devoted to attempting to define what YA is.
Yeah, it's really hard.
But I think one definition that I really like is that YA literature, and this comes from an author called Sarah Rees Brennan said this, although when I mentioned to her once that I always quote her, she looked really surprised and said, did I say that? That sounds really clever, which is classic Sarah. But the idea that YA literature is the literature of self-transformation. It's the literature of working out who you are and who you're going to be. And I think that is one of the reasons that we read it even as adults, because, whether it's your first day at school or your first day doing school pickup and not knowing anyone, or your first date post-divorce, or first day at a new school or your first day at a new job, these experiences are universal, and they're all about constantly deciding who you are going to be in new situations. And YA is all about self-discovery.
About the only truism that I can think of from every YA novel I've ever read is the age of the protagonist. They are a teenager. Not every book with a teenage protagonist is a YA novel, but every YA novel that I've read has a teenage protagonist.
Yeah, I think
that's about the only golden rule I can actually think of. YA is a really difficult thing to define. It's probably more a demographic and a marketing term than any actual measure of the content of the books. You look at an author like John Green and Us, for example. Like our books have almost nothing in common, but yeah, they still sit on the shelves together in the bookstores. So yeah, it's kind of weird in that sense. YA is really unique in that way.
Yeah. Sorry, I can see Imogen asking, would I mind uploading a link to this quote? I'm so sorry, I don't have one. She said it on a panel that I was watching at WorldCon in London years ago. So would you like to see this series made into a movie? We would like to see the series made into a TV series.
We've sold the rights to MGM already. And a guy, oh God, I can't even remember our producer's name. Amy, can you remember him? He's the dude who did A Beautiful Mind anyway.
He's not watching this right now.
I think his name's Avi. Sorry, I doubt he's watching. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning in America. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
We sold the rights to that last year.
And we're going to be acting as consulting producers. So
that's really exciting. I mean, Hollywood is a weird place, and we're not getting fitted for our premiere night suits just yet. But yeah, it's all cruising on in the background, so that's exciting. It'll be awesome if it happens.
It will be. Erin says, how dark do you expect the TV series to be? It's early days, Erin. Who knows?
It's one of those things where you kind of sign over a lot of control as an author. You have to hope for the best. Unless you're an exceptionally wealthy and influential author, you probably won't have any control over what the production company does to your property. So you need to hand it over to a pair of hands that you trust. Yeah.
All right. I feel like we should probably be wrapping up soon, but what have we got? Do you have a favorite character in the series or someone that you enjoy writing more than the others? I actually don't have someone that I enjoy writing more than the others, because I think we've worked really hard to give them all, really cool hero moments, and to give them all big moments of their own.
Yeah. I think in terms of journey, 𝘕𝘬 is my favorite. Like, just the way she's grown. Like, for those of you who haven't read the books, 𝘕𝘬 is a super introverted, socially shy character, and we reflected that in the first book by having her chapters be super short. Like, the first 𝘕𝘬 chapter in the first book is 1 sentence long, I think. But as she kind of comes out of her shell and gets to know the people around her and trust them a little more, her chapters get bigger and bigger. And so by the time we're at the end of book 2 and she, knows and cares for everyone that she's with, she becomes a fully realized POV. So I think, like, inadvertently, we didn't really think about it when we were doing that, but the way that worked out mechanically is a really cool way to show her growth as a character. So yeah, she's one of my faves. Maybe not the fave, but she's really cool.
Yeah. All right.
We have been given the last question.
Question sign. All right.
So, sorry, there's a lot of you that we didn't get to. So
we are doing a few more online events. Hang on, there is a last question. What are some books you've enjoyed lately? That is an excellent last question. Thank you.
So I have just started reading this one. I've got it here. It's called First Sister by Lyndon Lewis. It is YA sci-fi kind of space opera-ish. It's super smart. I'm only about a third of the way through it, but it's super smart. It's super queer. Linda's an awesome person. We met up with her a couple of years ago and have kind of been buddies with her ever since. And this is out in August of this year. So check it out. It's a really cool book so far. Yeah.
I am reading at the moment The Fascinators by Andrew Eliopoulos, which is kind of like if Rainbow Rowell and Becky Albertalli had a baby a little bit. It's set in the real world, but there is also magic, and there is requited love, there is unrequited love, there are complicated friendships, and it's a really, it's exactly the sort of book that I need to slip away inside right now. So that's why I'm enjoying it so much. It's tough right now, and I guess this is as good a time as any to say we hope you guys are all doing okay, and we hope everyone,
Thanks for showing up tonight. And like, we found out earlier this week that Aurora Burning is the #1 best-selling YA book in the country at the moment. So that's all thanks to you guys. It sounds cheesy and we say it a lot, but we honestly couldn't do this without you. Like, we owe everything that we have to you guys, and we always have a soft spot for Australia and Australian readers. So thank you so much for showing up tonight. Thank you for all the support that you give us. Thank you for spreading the word, because Australia got the book early. That's one of the cool things about being Australian. You tend to get our books earlier than the States. So, thank you for coming on the journey with us. We really love you for it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And take care, everyone, and stay safe and wash your hands.
And if we didn't get to your question, we're doing one more event next week, I think, or two. But the details for all that are up on our websites, and they're also up on our Instagram. So if you didn't get to answer to your question and want to come along to one of those events, we would love to see you there.
We would indeed.
Thanks to Dymocks for having us. Thanks to all you guys for showing up. It was awesome to see you all enjoy your Friday evening, what's left of it.
Yes. And good night.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.